Good morning, honorable members. Let's start with our meeting. The meeting is officially open. Welcome all the members of the committee. Welcome the Commissioner, Dr. Maku, the Deputy Commissioners, and the Executive of SARS. Welcome our support team, the media, and all in attendance. Roll call. Do we have apologies?
Good morning, sir. We have an apology from the minister.
Okay, yeah, we got the apology from the minister as he's attending to his what is that? Is it the BRICS Bank or what in Russia? Okay. The next item is the briefing by SARS on the Strat plan and their APP. Dr. Maku, you are welcome to present the Strat plan and the APP. Over to you.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and the members. Thank you for the opportunity for us to present our Strat plan this morning. It being my maiden presentation, we appreciate the opportunity once again to shed light and account on the work that we are doing at the tax administration, especially if we consider the fact that we are an organization in transition, having taken leave of our previous commissioner. I want to just raise the attention of the members, Chair, through you, to the fact that this APP is effectively one first year of the Vision 2030 that finds itself in the 5-year strategic plan that we have put forward as the organization. I will spend some time touching on the key aspects of our strategic direction as we move forward, but also to give the committee assurances around the construct of continuity in the work that we will be doing. We appreciate the time, as I said, to present here. I'm joined by our colleagues at SARS, DC Scholes, Deputy Commissioner Carl Scholes, as well as the Chief of Staff, Jine Padayachi, and other colleagues that are in the boardroom in Pretoria. Chair, in pursuit of our regional agenda, we present today out of Tanzania as we are scheduled to chair the WCO, the World Customs Organization regional meeting that's taking place today and tomorrow. And this is in an ongoing effort to ensure that SARS continues to shape the continental agenda as well as the global agenda on issues of custom. That said, I'll kick off the presentation. Our presentation, Chair, is going to cover four areas. In that we will touch on aspects that we call the introduction. The introduction will cover the purpose of the presentation, just some issues around oversight and parliamentary engagements, and will reflect on the year that was. Part 2 will talk on the SARS strategy. I will not spend much time there, except just to reflect as the incoming commissioner what direction we are driving the organization towards. Part 3 will zone into the annual performance plan that we are presenting, which embeds itself into Vision 2030. We will lift up the performance measures, some resource considerations, some of the risks that pertain to that annual performance plan. We will then talk about for transparency, some of the amendments to the current strategic plan. We would appreciate that the strategic plan that talks to Vision 2030 needs to also respond to the changes in environment as those changes manifest. We'll then conclude by giving you some of the current affairs that we are grappling with in the tax administration and the overall conclusion of our presentation. In the purpose of this presentation, Chair, we just want to highlight the strategic priorities of the organization whilst we work towards outlining our performance targets for the year underway. We will also use this presentation to emphasize our commitment to continued enhancement of taxpayer and trader as well as employee experience. We place our customer and our employees at the center of the work that we are pursuing in terms of the experience that they have whenever they deal with us. And our commitment is to continue to enhance that experience. And you'll see as we talk through our APP how that manifests itself. We also want to use this presentation to account to this honorable committee and seek oversight and guidance as we've always come and have gotten oversight and guidance from this committee. By way of introduction, Chair and honorable members, we just want to appreciate the constant interaction that we've had with this committee. The latest one was the oversight by this committee and the Committee on Appropriations that came through on the 30th of April to visit our Hilton office as well as our data center and or the bridge. We appreciate these. We think they are impactful in terms of the work that we do. We also want to appreciate the other oversight visits to the ports of entry that have happened in the last year. All of these culminate into giving us an opportunity to account, but also for oversight to be played in terms of the work that we do as the tax administration. So we continue to appreciate the engagements that we are having in this regard. We've taken count of the engagements in total, about 50 engagements through parliamentary questions that we have received from the committee members from various political parties, but also the appearances that we have had in the last 12 months. Chair, for this presentation, I've decided just to take the oversight and the engagements that we have had with the committee and just reflect a little bit on the themes that have come through. We are doing this for the first time, and we just want to give the committee assurance that we are listening whenever we are engaging with this committee. Some of the key themes that have come through in the last year are being shared here so that we can reflect back on whether our strategic plan, our performance plan for the year does attend to these themes. I'll quickly go through some of the themes that have come through in terms of the questions that have come across and or points of engagement in the last 12 months. I'm effectively, Chair, playing back to yourselves what appears to have been top of your mind in the last 12 months, because I think for us to be able to move forward, we need to always keep a record of what the oversight bodies such as yourself are raising around the work that we do. We know that illicit trade and contraband enforcement features in the themes of the questions that we have received. This cuts across illicit cigarettes, alcohol, tobacco, smuggling trends, seizures and arrests, prosecutions. These are themes that have come through in the questions of the last 12 months that you have raised with us. And therefore, as we talk about the work that we're going to execute or we are executing in this current year under review and going forward, we are acutely aware of this theme of work that members have raised questions on. There's been questions around border controls, inspection capacity and enforcement tools. The questions about scanner availability, uptime, throughput, container selection for inspection, questions around the detector dock, deployment and coverage, and overall ports of entry enforcement capability. These questions, again, have come through.
Dr. Mako, there seems to be a challenge of connectivity. Deputy Commissioner's calls, what's happening?
Good morning, Chairperson. I just want to verify that I'm audible.
Yeah, you are audible. We have lost Dr. Makhu.
Chair, apologies. There was a little bit of.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, maybe you can switch off the video so that it can strengthen the connectivity.
Okay, apologies for that. I'll just reshare the presentation so that we can continue. I trust the presentation is visible, Chair.
Yes.
Quickly then, issues of governance, accountability and public sector financial oversight have come through in terms of the various questions that I reflect under that point. Risk management, how do we manage risk within the tax administration, as well as issues of targeting methodologies, how do we target those that we audit and those that we enforce against, as well as just overall performance management of the tax administration, the hit rates that we've seen, the investigation volumes, tracking and monitoring approaches to gauge enforcement capability and deterrence. These, Chair, are the issues that have come through from the committee. Data transparency, record keeping, and interagency coordination is another area that has come through as a theme. Public procurement and expenditure scrutiny, whether we do get value for money on the work that we do. You'll recall towards the end of last financial year, there were questions around expenditure on law firms, rentals in terms of leases, and issues of justifications and control around these costs came through. We were also asked, Chair, to talk about cybersecurity and resilience of our systems and state systems across the board. The focus here was on data breaches, issues of ransomware, protective measures that we have as a tax administration. And as we talk about our annual performance plan, these things will permeate in the discussions. Issues around policy designs versus unintended consequences of policy, the tension between above inflation, excise increases, as well as what it does then to promote illicit trade. These are things that have come through from the members when we did the themes of the questions that you've raised to us in the last financial year. Sector-specific compliance and blind spots that we may have, as well as the overall formalization of the informal market, the informal economy, so to speak. Specifically, members have raised issues pertaining to the taxi industry. This question continues to be in the environment, and it sort of drives, amongst others, things that we are presenting in our annual performance plan. The informal economy continues to be at the center of the work that we want to be able to do. So, Chair, we are listening in terms of what questions members are raising. I'm asking the SARS organization to continue to be responsive in terms of the annual performance plan to some of these issues that members are frequently raising. Chair, we have noted that in the response to these questions, SARS has continued to maintain a turnaround time that is around aligned to the expected timelines. We don't have outstanding responses to parliamentary questions. My commitment is that we'll continue to make sure that whenever we are asked to commit to answers and to account, we will do so within the timelines that are provided. But not only to respond, but to keep these questions at the back of our minds so that we pick up these themes like the 10 that I have raised, so that when we think about our performance over the 12-month period, we also capture some of the challenges and some of the concerns that oversight bodies have in relation to our work. In terms of our work, we've said in the past that our work is about people. The story of SARS is about people, and that whatever we do inside the organization is about ensuring that we appreciate the transformational impact on the well-being of the lives of South Africans, especially the most vulnerable amongst us. This constitutes our higher purpose, and we continue to focus on this work. We know that our work matters to our democracy, and we've spoken about these numbers at length to say, since the founding of our democracy, we've seen the tax register, which is important for us because it reflects the work that we do and how we are growing that work. The 8.5% compounded annual growth rate talks about how we have consistently raised the tax register to make sure we put more people on the register. The 2 trillion we spoke about as achieved in 2026 brings into culmination a net annual growth rate of 9.7 in terms of the revenues that we have collected. And we continue to remind ourselves, Chair, as we present our annual performance plan, that a well-functioning tax administration is one of the proudest achievements of the democracy since 1994. And this is going to be important to keep in the minds of our colleagues as we move forward. We know that we have observed promising progress in critical areas of SARS. We are reminding ourselves that there's still much to be done to make sure that we move the bar forward. But we also want to raise the issue that funding challenges persist in terms of the work that we know we need to do. And we'll talk about that as we move forward. We believe that as we reflect on the year that was 25-26, that we are buoyed by the achievement under Commissioner Kisvetter, and we continue to be appreciative of the legacy he left us with in the organization, and we want to protect that legacy and build on it as we move forward. And therefore, the revenue results we achieved in the last financial year tell us that we are on the right trajectory in terms of our strategic plan as enshrined in Vision 2030, and that we need to continue in that trajectory, of course, with some tweaking that we need to drive. We're also proud, Chair and honorable members, to reflect that in the 2025-26 year, not only did we deliver results around revenue, we know that generally our performance attracts focus in as far as revenue is concerned, but we also want to assure this committee that our performance is not only revenue driven. There's quite a number of other measures that are in our annual performance plan for 25-26 that before we can throw forward to 26-27, we just want to reflect on. Our 95% achievement rate, which we'll talk about more in our annual report when we present it, but we thought let's pause and just reflect on what we saw in the last financial year, not only from a revenue point of view, but also on the measures that are in our APP. We have achieved 95% of this. Of course, the AG is still auditing our work, but we are comfortable that we have met 95%, 19 of the 20 key results that we had been contracted to. An area that continues to be an area of challenge because it depends on opportunities to recruit is the area around the employment equity plan, scores particularly on gender equity at senior levels. We think that as we continue to get opportunities to recruit, we will, in the 26-27, see an improvement in this particular area. You'll see us talking about this area in our plan for the year underway. Again, here, we just want to also reflect that whilst we've not been able to move and achieve on gender equity, we are confident, I am confident that the senior roles that we are currently underway to recruit will help us to achieve results. One of those is the Chief HR Officer for SARS, which is a role we've not had for quite some time for the last 5 years. We are expediting processes to recruit that role, and it gives us an opportunity to bring into senior leadership the right type of equity as per our plans. We are, of course, an organization in transition, Chair, before I get into the actual APP, and I thought it's important that we reflect here to give some assurance to the committee to say that we are building on a solid and stable foundation as we transition as an organization. Let me touch on a few things that under my tenure, we are committed to prioritize. Just 5-6 things that I just thought it's important that I give the committee assurance on. Continuity and stability is going to be very important for me. We want to decisively build on the gains of the last 7 years, and we want to make sure that we leverage the SARS strategic playbook because personally I have been party to constituting that strategic playbook, and we would want to make sure that there is continuity and stability. We know that when there's changes in leadership in organizations, sometimes there's this temptation to change things for the sake of changing them. We want to assure this organization or this committee, honorable committee, that my posture and the posture of the SARS current leadership team is that we want to drive continuity and stability to build on the gains of the last while. But there are also some things I'd like to drive under my tenure. Number two, we reflect on the issue of people-centered leadership approach. We want to bring leaders closer to the shop floor. My assessment is that we need to ensure that leaders are close to people. They can be able to listen to some of the challenges that our people on the ground are facing, that they engage the general workforce at SARS, that we are transparent in the work that we do, and that the issue of meritocracy starts to permeate the work that we do. We do not want to treat everybody the same. We want to make sure that those that are worthy of merit in our organization are put on the pedestal. Those that do not bring merit are helped to bring merit into the environment. So meritocracy is going to be the center of the work that we do. As I move forward, we want to recognize and honor merit where it can be seen. And that will be very important for me as we drive the organization forward. We are emphasizing on values-driven leadership. We want our leaders to be held to values, and these values are important if we are going to make sure that the tax administration rises up as trusted and admired as part of our vision. Here we're talking about fairness, integrity, honesty. And members, I would like to make sure that in our organization, the issue of ethical conduct is enshrined, because if we are not seen to be beyond reproach as the tax administration, it affects the trust that we are afforded by the tax-paying community. Issues of professionalism and human respect are values that are going to permeate our tenure as we move forward. I am quite a snob for service excellence, and this culture is going to permeate our environment, where the quality of the service that we render is going to be driven through all our channels that we have, and the professionalism in how we actually treat taxpayers in the multiple channels that we have is going to be very important as we move forward, Honorable Chair and members. And here we want to make sure that the ethos of SARS at your service really becomes what taxpayers and traders experience at the coalface in terms of our interactions with them. And this is going to permeate our strategy as we move forward. We also, Chair, want to make sure that in this tenure, we connect with and educate taxpayers. I feel specifically that there's a lot of misunderstanding and miseducation around the work that we do. And we are going to be going into a number of channels, both electronic and otherwise, to make sure that we educate taxpayers around what we do and how we do the work that we do. We're going to be making sure that stakeholders and relationship with stakeholders, such as tax practitioners, is really improved as we move forward. The issue of relationships and educating the ecosystem, for me, is very important to the work that we are going to be doing going forward. But at the core of all of this is a key message, Chair, that delivery will be driven by people first, disciplined execution, strong governance, and value-centered professional performance culture that will enforce or reinforce lasting public opinion, confidence in SARS as an institution of the state. Therefore, if you want to look at the strategic direction from 2026 and beyond, we want to move from the clarity that Commissioner Kisveta created around clarity of purpose, clarity of direction, of strategy. We want to focus more on disciplined execution as we move forward. And we are indeed confronted with global, domestic, and institutional environment at SARS that is complex and volatile. If you just look at the macroeconomic environment we're operating within, it demands that we raise our stakes in terms of leadership, execution, and the trust that we build in the ecosystem. We require more than just adaptation, in my view. This period will demand us to adopt clear strategic direction, disciplined execution, as I've said, and institutional resolve to be able to continue to achieve the results that we have seen in the last 7 years, despite the headwinds that we will be facing as we move forward. So our posture, Chair, going forward is protecting what we have built over the years, but also to say, how do we then focus on two key things? Accelerating modernization. We believe that accelerating modernization is going to be key going forward, because if we don't accelerate modernization, we run a risk of being irrelevant and not future-proofing our organization. The rate of change in technology, that even some of those that are evading taxes in the illicit space, that technology is available to that part of the economy as well. And we want to make sure that the way we run the tax administration is seen to be accelerating its modernization. And we have prepared a paper in this regard, and we've spoken broadly about it. And we want to accelerate that modernization, but also we want to get the basics right. I have said that this balance is important, that you accelerate modernization on one hand, but in my tenure, I would want to be focused on getting some of the basics right. My view is that there are some basics that as an organization, we need to revisit so that ultimately we enable sustainable fiscal outcomes for South Africa in line with our higher purpose. It is important that we just remind the committee of our strategic playbook. We call this the SARS way. Our Vision 2030, our strategic intent, our 9 strategic objectives, the clarity of our purpose, as well as the strategic intent that is premised on voluntary compliance that informs our compliance philosophy. But again, the desire to balance risk and service in the way that we do and how we find that balance. I'll quickly go through the next part of the presentation because we have made these matters before this committee before. So our purpose will continue to be driven by law to collect all revenue that is due. We to continue to enhance compliance, but also to ensure that we facilitate legitimate trade. And we continue to wake up and be encouraged by the fact that all of the work that we do is not for ourselves, but is to make sure that the well-being of all South Africans is achieved by making sure that we help to build a capable state that fosters economic growth and sustainable development. Our Vision 2030 continues to hold smart, modern South with unquestionable integrity, trusted and admired. We believe that this is a compelling vision that we need to pursue. Voluntary compliance continues to be at the center of our strategic intent because we know that enforced compliance will cost us far more than we can be able to afford. And therefore, we will work with the tax-paying world, the tax ecosystem, to drive the agenda of voluntary compliance. Our 9 strategic objectives, again, will continue to drive our strategic intent of voluntary compliance. And here we have core enabling and relationship building objectives that we have taken this committee through. These are found in our APP on pages 10 to 17. And Chair, if you allow me, I will not spend time on these. If there's questions later, we will take them on. Our compliance philosophy says we will treat people in line with their behavior in terms of compliance. Those that are willing to do whatever is necessary to comply will make it easy for them, will make them aware of their obligations. Whereas those on the extreme end that consciously take decision not to comply, we will increasingly throw the book at them and enforce deliberately in that regard. The balance is important for us. It does not serve us to pursue any of these extremes on their own right. We want to find a balance, whether it's service and risk. We want to make sure that we don't default to one end at the expense of the another, where we probably may make it too easy for taxpayers and traders at the expense of not picking up issues of compliance. Chair, here, it is my conviction that in my tenure or under my tenure, we need to find a way of less burdening those that are generally compliant and pursue those that show signs of a nefarious activity within the tax ecosystem. If then I summarize our posture, we said we want to accelerate modernization. We want to get the basics right. What does accelerating modernization, so that I'm clear, mean going forward? It's about future-proofing SARS to remain effective, responsive, and trusted. This we will do by leveraging data, digital platforms, and ethical use of AI. I know that of late, AI has been at the center of conversations, but we want to make sure that we are clear around the ethical use of AI and the ethical governance of the use of AI. We are busy putting together a framework. It's quite mature. It has been debated throughout the organization. And in the next coming month, we will wrap that up as we move forward, because we believe that AI will give us that leverage point as we move forward in our work. Enhancing taxpayer experience, we believe that this is going to be important, as I spoke about it, and it's part of things that we want to accelerate as we move forward. Ensuring technology shrinks the gap between economic change and institutional response. That's going to be important as we move forward. Advancing modernization 3.0, an area of importance. We think that through accelerating modernization, we'll be able to make a dent on the illicit economy. And you would have seen in the last while that we've spoken about an enforcement inspectorate, which is about boots on the ground, but also to marry that with technology around issues of track and trace. You would have seen that ourselves and the National Consumer Commission, we have now signed an MOU that already allows us to work together around the traceability of product throughout the value chain, whether it's cigarettes, whether it's alcohol, and other related products from an accessible supply point of view. So accelerating modernization will allow us to, in my conviction, to close some of the issues that we see in the illicit economy. What does it mean to getting the basics right? As I said earlier, professionalism throughout SARS is important for me, and we will be driving this within this next 5 years, particularly in this current year. The issues around ethical conduct, there are things that I worry about. You would have heard that in recent times, we've had to get preservation orders, even against our own employees. And we are here looking to ensure a policy around lifestyle audits. We are pretty much advanced on that. I am pleased to report that when I spoke to leaders at SARS around issues of lifestyle audits, quite a number of our leaders volunteered to sign a pledge that I'm finalizing, where leaders will pledge themselves to voluntarily participate at whatever frequency the organization may decide on lifestyle audits. And this is aligned with what the whole of government is doing in this particular matter. And all of this is to make sure that there's an approach around ethical conduct. With this said, we also want to be clear that we'll do everything to protect our employees that are approached, threatened around committing acts that are unethical by the powers that are vested in them. And we want to make sure that our employees are also protected through the whistleblowing lines that we have in the organization and other mechanisms that we have that provide a system that can be used to help our employees that want to remain ethical despite the pressures that they may face in the front line, particularly. As I said, people-centered leadership is going to be important. High-quality service delivery. These are basics that are important for any tax administration. If these are not in place, you can collect all the revenues, but increasingly you're going to deteriorate in how you are able to collect those revenues in the future if these basics are not correctly placed in the organization. Professionalization, continuous development of our people. We are competing for talent with the private sector, and therefore we want to make sure that our people find the environment to be developing them on an ongoing basis. So things such as continuous development programs within the organization, we are looking at that. We believe that Commissioner Kisvete set us a precedent around succession planning that led to my appointment. And we would want to make sure that that template is permeated throughout the
Good morning, Chair. It is Carl Scholes from the boardroom. I will continue the presentation, Chair, with your permission, until Commissioner Johnston reconnects Chair, his presentation is also frozen. So I will, if you give me one moment, I will just share the screen from my side.
Apologies.
Okay.
I lost the connection. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you are. You are, Johnson. Please proceed.
Apologies, we'll reshare the presentation just shortly. We were just on the issue of debt management. We want to prioritize this as a basic area that we need to focus on, but also the issue of ensuring that not only are we crisp and clear on debt management in our approach in that regard, we want to make sure that our service and the reach of our service channels is effective. We still believe that there are some areas that we are not fully reaching out to from a service point of view, and we are busy with a footprint analysis so that we are able to find ways of reaching taxpayers where they want us to reach them, and not only to confine them to digital channels, but to find other ways that we can be able to physically engage them. And I'm pleased, Chair, to announce that in the CBD of Johannesburg, we have opened up a branch or a service center in Newtown on the 4th of the month of May. And this was a response to overwhelming feedback by taxpayers to ask us to move away from our long-serving service center to the area of Newtown, where most taxpayers are moving towards. When we talk about service reach and channel effectiveness, it's about listening to taxpayers, following taxpayers where they are, and servicing them at the points that are meaningful to them as we move forward. We want to broaden the tax base so that we reduce revenue leakage. And we also want to move away from resolving disputes to preventing disputes. And that work will continue to be underway. And lastly, Chair, we want to make sure that our legal and policy framework is supportive of digital transformation. Often, the technology geeks move very fast ahead of the law, and we want to make sure that the law is continuously reviewed to make sure that it is responsive to the changes in technology within the tax administration. As we accelerate modernization, we want our legal frameworks and policies to be responsive to that environment. And therefore, at the center of everything that we will do as we accelerate modernization and get the basics right, it will be about placing at the center of our work our customers and our people, Chair and members. The environmental analysis that we've done to inform our APP suggests that we are operating in a very challenging environment, that the evolving landscape demands that we adapt rapidly to unprecedented changes that we see. When we speak to our colleagues all over the world, digitalization and artificial intelligence has become very essential as an enabling tool that must be understood and used responsibly. The issues of aging workforce at SARS, we've got an average age of the workforce at around 47 years old, and with a tenure of about 17 years. So we've got people that have stayed in the organization, that have got tenure, they've got institutional memory, but again, they are aging. We need to think around what does this mean in terms of loss of institutional knowledge, and how do we inject new blood into the environment. By the way, this is not only a challenge to SARS, it's a challenge to most tax administration. The increasing tax debt continue to present an unrealistic contingent liability where people that are fraudulent end up with assessments that are raised, and by the time we get to them, some of them we are not able to collect because assets have been dissipated, and therefore make it difficult for us to collect the debt. But we continue to pursue debt under that challenging environment. Growing tax gap is an area that we know presents a challenge in the environment that we're in. Cross-border tax and financial crimes is a global challenge. As we are here to speak to our colleagues at the World Customs Organization's regional meeting, this issue of cross-border tax crimes and financial crimes continues to be at the center of conversations. And we are hoping to work in our APP to deal with some of these issues. Insufficient investment in tax administration capabilities is another area that continues to be a challenge in our environment, and we want to be quite clear of some of these challenges upfront, Chair, so that we are able to counter them where we can or to navigate through them where we can. Budget Review 2026 raised some downside risks. If you look at, I think it's page number 8 of the Budget Review 2026, you will see some of the scenarios, scenario A and B, and scenario B was linked to materialization of some of the risks that were highlighted, including global geopolitical tensions globally, as well as disruption of supply chains in the environment. So these continues to be the environment within which we are operating in the tax administration environment. But we continue to want to make sure that these challenges, though they persist, we also counter them in a pursuit of revenue, trade facilitation, and driving compliance. What is therefore in our annual performance plan, Chair? I'll quickly also go through these, taking them as read, and I'll spend a bit of time on some because they're important. We have on our core outcome, number 1, increased voluntary compliance. Key results here talk about achieving the estimates, the printed estimates as given to us by the Minister. We want to achieve 100% of those estimates or even exceed them where possible. We know that currently we are facing a number of headwinds. We do expect that because of the challenges that we are experiencing in the global supply chains, that we are likely to import some inflation, and we do think that may affect products such as VAT as disposable income dwindles. We don't know what the monetary policy is going to respond like to the challenges that we are facing. So we are collecting revenue in this year under very challenging circumstances, but we continue to be resolute around collecting the revenue that is officially communicated as an estimate. Currently, that number is 2.13 trillion rands. We continue to focus our efforts towards that in the year that we are in. Voluntary Compliance Index. This, again, is very important for us because it talks about, are those that are supposed to be registered? Are those that are supposed to filing and filing on time? Are those that are supposed to paying and paying on time? Those that declare, are they declaring accurately? So that ultimately, if they do, in these all these areas, act beyond reproach voluntarily, so that we start seeing a movement from enforced compliance to voluntary compliance. And this index is very important for us as we track it. In the year under review, 26-27, we want to drive our compliance as close to 67% and 70% as possible. Towards the end of the Vision 2030, you'll see towards the end that we are pushing to get to 70% in this regard. The Trade Facilitation Index is very important. We decided, in line with World Trade Organization protocols, to define a Trade Facilitation Index so that we can compare with other administrations on the same basis. The World Trade Organization gives some 12 dimensions across which we must measure trade facilitation. And Chair, for this year that we are wanting to achieve 74% in this regard. We know that globally, best customs administrations facilitate trade at 82% and gradually want to get to that environment. And we think that some of the things we talk about in customs and excise modernization, scanners in the ports of entry, seamless movement across the ports of entry, time release studies that we are doing in the ports of entry, all of this is aimed at improving our Trade Facilitation Index. Again, I've decided with the team that we're going to pull through targeted interventions on illicit economy activities. Here we are saying that we would want to achieve significant progress on the strategic plan on illicit economy. And this is going to be very important for us as we move forward, Chair and members. The service charter commitments, again, this is a social contract between us and taxpayers. We want to make sure that we achieve in line with that contract that we have with taxpayers and traders. And in this regard, we want to make sure this year that we reach 90% as we move forward. But Chair, here I want to move beyond just the dynamics of just the service charter. We just want to make sure that we move into the experience, the lived experience of taxpayers and traders. Hence, earlier on, you'd have heard me saying strategically, we want to drive issues of taxpayer experience in the system. Outcome number 3, enhanced employee engagement. We continue to want to make sure that people want to see SARS as people in our environment, our assets, human capital. They continue to see SARS as the employer of choice, that they are fully engaged in as far as employee engagement index is concerned. We will be pursuing 70% in this regard. We know that when there is transition in organizations, research tells us that employee engagement does tend to slag a bit, and we want to make sure that we counter any adverse effects that come from transition by ensuring employees that there is continuity in the work that we do. Of course, we spoke about employment equity. We continue to make sure that our employment equity plan is achieved as submitted with the Department of Employment and of Labor and Employment. But we also want to strengthen leadership, the leadership system, by making sure that the leadership evaluation index also starts to reflect that we've got leaders whose behaviors are accepted throughout the environment. We spoke about getting the basics right. In this regard, our process efficiency is important. This measure is a measure that in my previous role, I thought it's important to introduce it, because if you've got a process, we've got multiple processes at SARS, and we want to make sure that our processes, firstly, are based on an index that is defined, and we can be able to measure the efficiency of every process so that we know which processes require attention as we move forward. The issue around improved operational efficiency, we want to make sure that to reflect the fact that we are good stewards of resources that are given to us as part of budget vote number 7 of the Treasury, we want to make sure that we do not attract any qualification in terms of the work that we do from an AG's perspective. So our control environment needs to be quite strong, and we are glad that in the last 3-4 years, we've not had challenges in this regard. The current year, the current audit is ongoing, and we are encouraged by what we are seeing coming through from the early interactions with the Auditor General in as far as the audit that is underway is concerned. In terms of long-term sustainability, outcome number 6 of our work, we here, Chair, we link ourselves back to our modernization work. We want to make sure that our digital platforms are not only modernized, but they are available and responsive to the environment. Here, we're pursuing a 99% availability, and we therefore are tracking diligently everything that threatens the availability of our systems. We know that if our systems are not available, the type of taxpayer experience that we want to create, we are not able to achieve. So we watch closely at this. We also want to make sure that the information of taxpayers and traders is secure, that we continue to make sure that the breaches of information are kept to zero. And touch wood, so far we've not experienced any material breaches, but we know that there's always attempts in the environment. Chair, perhaps here I must pause and say we have been working with the Office of the Tax Ombuds on some issues that have been raised around issues of compromised taxpayer profiles. And we are of the view that the two-factor authentication and the introduction of biometrics into our environment is going to assist us a great deal. So as we move forward, anybody that comes into the SARS system needs to be authenticated through the biometric and two-factor authentication process. But we are also moving further, Chair, to say those that are already in our base, we want to make sure continually we refresh them and make sure that they are exposed to biometrics or they register and enroll on biometrics as we move forward. All of this is done to make sure that we minimize any potential threat to our system as we move forward. The issues around collaboration with other stakeholders, it's an area, as I said, that we will be pursuing with taxpayers, but also with the whole of government. We've been working very closely with the likes of the FIC. I've indicated that we're working together with the OTO. We are working very closely with the CIPC, because we also know that people that want to defraud the tax system, they register themselves with the CIPC and they make changes that permeate through the tax system. And through that, they're able to have some nefarious activities within the tax system. So we're working to tighten that up to make sure that it is as strong as possible. Chair, moving towards a close as we move forward, around our annual and quarterly targets, we have disaggregated our annual targets into quarterly targets, and I will not spend much time here. These are on page 25 of our annual performance plan. If we then move forward around resourcing, we've spoken about our appreciation of the 7.5 billion that the minister has afforded us as SARS. This, you will remember, was dedicated towards revenue recovery through our debt program, but also to start an initiation of our modernization work. I'm pleased to share with the committee that we are already in the market for inline scanners that we want to place at Libombo. And we think that round about November, those will be delivered. And we think by this financial year, would have started incorporating that into that particular port of entry. We are spending around 180 million rands on these scanners. And if you, again, remember my reflection when you visited us on the 30th of April, we've got 20 ports of entry. And if you just reflect on the fact that we're already spending 180 on one port, if you multiply that, you get to about 3.6 billion just to make sure that all our ports of entry have got 100% scanning capacity. And we've not touched on other parts that needs to be modernized, that the illicit environment. So the 7.5 billion needs to really be taken into context against what we need to actually achieve in curbing non-compliance in the system. We've just taken a view since 2017 of what we have asked for. The second row in the table will give you a sense of what SARS would have approached the environment over the previous years, asking to be funded for, and what was availed to us. And you will see that consistently, what we get to ask for and what we get given, there's a negative delta. And this cumulatively robs the tax administration of the ability to go full throttle on areas that we need to be able to do. If I spend a bit of time here, it means though you may identify non-compliance in certain areas, you may not have the capacity to be able to throw the resources and the technology to those areas. And therefore, you are forced to choose your battles quite carefully. And therefore, this issue is at the back of the appreciation of the monies that we've received before. But I think it's also important to just reflect the areas of underfunding that continues to persist. I'm acutely aware that it's a tight balancing act that is being attempted here between expenditure and the funding of tax administrations and others. However, I do think that if we are going to dent, for instance, the illicit trade and the illicit economy and deal with general non-compliance, it's going to be important that we start to think around how we fund the tax administration. And I'm very keen to initiate discussions around what the rest of the world has done to fund tax administrations. Do we fund the tax administration on a grant basis alone? Do we fund it on a cost-plus regime? Or do we fund it on a cost-plus regime, plus also recapitalization periodically, whether it's 5 years or 7 years? We need to go back to the drawing board as the tax administration to start to do some scholarly work to advance a need for us to be funded. And I'm going to continue this work because I think it's important whilst we understand that the fiscus is under pressure. Now, I think what's going to be favorable for us and create an enabling environment as we do our work in this current year and beyond, fit for purpose procurement regime. We do think that if you're going to modernize a tax administration, your procurement regime needs to be fit. We think what's going to make it favorable for us is the ability to make sure that the whole of government collaboration is insisted upon. We have said in the National Illicit Economy Disruption Program that it takes the whole of government to be able to disrupt meaningfully the illicit economy as a phenomenon. The legislative code that is in support of a digital era is going to be important. Investment appetite to enable sustainable funding requirements. Some of the work that we need to do is multi-year, and therefore it's important that we are able to start work with certainty of funding as we move forward. For instance, if you want to modernize the VAT system, we've learned from our colleagues globally that that's a 5 to 10 year investment, and you cannot stop and start such investments. You need to be quite certain and clear from the onset of that work that you've got a certainty of funding so that you can commit meaningfully. Strengthening tax morality by improving value proposition to citizens. This is going to be very important because frequently we hear that those that pay taxes ask about the value proposition that they receive as taxpayers. And this is important for us if we're going to strengthen tax morality in the system. The risks that we face, we have not changed these risks because we think they persist. They speak to the erosion of social cohesion that harms compliance, growing tax gap, competition for scarce critical resources, rapid technological change and AI that is also available to the illicit world as much as it is available to tax administrations, underfunding of SARS, which hinders our legal compliance. We think that we have some mitigation to a certain extent, but some of these are beyond our mitigation and require some structural thinking around how we approach them. There are some amendments we've done to the strategic plan, and some of these I will not necessarily speak to. They are minor in nature. Outcome number 4, we've split into streamlined internal processes as well as improved operational efficiencies because we want to focus on these differently under point number 2 on the screen. And we have changed the outcome relating to the Auditor General to unqualified audit opinion with no material findings. We are moving our service charter from 85 to 90 because we think it's an area that we need to really accelerate on. We also want to make sure that all the employee engagement issues that have been raised in the organization, we hold leadership to implementing 100% of the interventions that employees have asked us to act on. Chair, in terms of current affairs, as I move towards a close, we've got the filing season that is coming up. In July, we have issued a gazette on the 30th of April, indicating that the filing season for non-provisional taxpayers will close on the 23rd of October, 2026, and for trust and provisional taxpayers on the 22nd of January, 2027. We are preparing for this and we want to signal that we will be launching the filing season as it will be my first filing season. We want to make sure that we are clear. In this regard, Chair, we are working with employers, with third-party data providers to SARS. We are closing at the end of May for receipt of such information. And that information, in as far as it is accurate and complete, it helps us to have a seamless filing season for taxpayers come the month of July. The implementation of the global minimum tax is well underway, and our systems are being readied for the globe return. We think we are in line for the July implementation of the filing. We continue to test our systems with some of the multinationals that are affected. We want to progress. We're busy progressing modernization 3.0. We don't want to lose momentum here, Chair and honorable members. Progress on the illicit economy, we are continuing to work with the colleagues across BMA, DHA, through an interagency work to ensure that we progress this work as was initiated by Commissioner Kisveta under the 6-point plan. So we continue to focus on this. Debt collection project is work that we do not want to drop. As we move forward, we think it still holds value for us. We'll continue with that work in the current year. And in terms of progress this year, the financial year 2027, we saw revenue coming in April. It's still early to tell what's going to look like in the full year. But the numbers of April, despite the fact that there's been some relief given on the fuel levy, we've seen some other products that have countered the leakage we saw from the fuel levy. We are watching this space quite closely, and we'll continue to report to this committee in next type of engagements. We are watching closely trade. We see that imports coming into the country are affected, but we also continue to enforce compliance as we move forward. The various commissions, we've got a team dedicated looking at commissions of inquiry, and this area we continue to look into. We've got a dedicated team as we move forward. I am progressing in the transition. I'm very grateful that the team has welcomed me warmly, and we continue to work towards continuity, but also getting the basics right, as I've said. We conclude, Chair, by saying we've got an ongoing commitment to make sure that SARS remains firmly committed to continuity in the work that we do. The commitment is clear around service excellence, improving revenue collection, but also attracting, developing, and retaining a future-ready, high-performance workforce as an enabler to our work. We are continuing to be committed to the transformation agenda as far as accelerating modernization is concerned, and to focus on our people, as well as preserve and protect the institutional autonomy of SARS. SARS needs to continue to maintain its independence, and I am committed to making sure that the institutional autonomy of SARS is maintained. That's currency for us. If we lose that, we lose the trust and the confidence of the tax-paying world. And lastly, Chair, we look forward to continued support from this oversight body in terms of our modernization program, the legislative enablement as we drive our modernization, as well as the securing of sustainable investment and funding for SARS. We thank you for continuing to support us in this regard, but also to support us in terms of driving voluntary compliance and strengthening fiscal citizenship. Our view is that finally, when we achieve these things, SARS will remain resolute in serving South Africa with integrity, professionalism, and excellence today and into the future, and we would live to the ethos of SARS at your service. Chair, we imagine a future, and we continue to do so, that is characterized by a simple thank you to taxpayers, where tax just happens in our environment. It is made easy. We'll continue with this aspiration. It's a daunting aspiration, but we believe we can be able to achieve it. Chair, I will pause here and thank you for the time that has been afforded to us, and we'll take any questions from the members. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Makuba and the team of SARS for the presentation. Let's move to item 3, committee engagement, questions and comments. I've received 2 apologies. Honorable Mazibuko has got a commitment at the Appropriations Committee, which is meeting at 10. I've also received the apology from Honorable Mauta. She's rushing to another engagement where she's supposed to provide leadership as a whip. So let's proceed with the engagement. I'll start with Honorable Beasley, Honorable Van Ryan. Honorable Beasley, over to you.
And thank you, Chair, and greetings to my colleagues, and greetings to the Commissioner, Deputy Commissioners, and SARS staff. So first of all, just a couple of comments from my side, Chair, is just firstly, yeah, I was just so grateful to have done that oversight to SARS. I think it was 2 weeks ago. I was absolutely blown away. I really and truly was by the professional of SARS and what we actually saw, and it actually just shows what's possible in our country. And yeah, I'm proud to be a yeah, I was left there proud to be a South African, and just to show what is possible. I've been telling everybody, you know, who's willing to listen to me about what a great trip it was. So I just really want to compliment every SARS employee, whether it's commissioner, deputy commissioner, to every single staff. It's an amazing organization, and we've got so much to be proud of, because if SARS works, you know, our country can work. And then also to compliment SARS on a unqualified report with no findings. You know, I sit in Scopa, and every single day I see organizations coming before us with qualifications, and a 2.1 trillion size entity. It is incredible. So compliments to everybody involved in that too. So just a couple of another comment, Chair, is we got the budget vote ahead of us next week. And I really think if we as a committee can be united in our call for SARS to get more funding. SARS has shown what it can be done. And I think if every one of us next week dedicates part of the time, you know, obviously we will be supporting, or some of us will be supporting National Treasury's budget, but just a call, and if we all call it a united call, we can get SARS more funding, and it shows what SARS can do. You know, SARS has to stay above the curve in terms of modernization, because if it ever falls behind, it'll rapidly fall behind very, very quickly. And the whole focus on the illicit trade too, it is something new, and it needs to be properly funded. Otherwise, it's just going to be talk. And I'm very glad to see that in the metrics now, there's now metrics to measure the illicit trade, because otherwise it just remains talk. So if we can measure something, it shows that we're achieving. So just two questions or three questions to the commissioners, just in terms of tax debt. I know it's been difficult to collect. Maybe if we can just have a bit of an update, you know, what are the challenges on that? Is there anything we as a committee can assist with in terms of the tax debt? Is there anything that we've missed? Because obviously a tax debt of I think it's nearly 500 billion. It's just too much money to leave on the table. So yeah, if an update on that. Just in terms of the aging workforce, it's interesting dynamics. I mean, people obviously don't want to leave SARS. They're quite happy. They're 17 years average service. Yeah, just challenges around why it's not easier to get a younger workforce. And then the last point I had was just in terms of the economic downturn, you know, how sensitive is SARS's revenue collections to economic downturn? You know, if we economy drops by 0.5%, say from 1.8 to 1.3, does it have a massive impact on SARS collections for this year, or is the impact seen over a longer term? Thank you, Chair. And once again, thank you to the Commissioner, Deputy Commissioners and SARS staff. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Bisley. Honorable Van Rooyen.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and a very good morning to all in attendance. Let me also start by welcoming the presentation by the Commissioner, and of course, once more, because this is, of course, the new, maybe the first time that the Commissioner is presenting as someone who's not the Commissioner designate, who's now a confirmed Commissioner. Once more, SMK Party, we'd like to convey our well wishes in your new daunting assignment as the Commissioner of SARS. Let me start maybe where Honorable Beasley ended. The need for more funding for the institution. I think it as argued, or maybe as submitted in our previous engagement, Chair, the modernization program should be accordingly categorized and also be dissected per project, so as we are able, from an accountability and oversight perspective, we are able to hold SARS accountable on any value for money invested in each and every program of modernization. Now, I'm not sure if, as we speak today as this committee, we are adequately informed of which projects are a priority for this financial year, how much money has been allocated to those projects, but also how much of this allocation is viewed as a shortfall. But also interestingly, Chair, for us to know, more especially to inform the debate, the budget vote debate next week, what's the progress of the engagement between SARS and the National Treasury on making up for this shortfall or identified shortfall, you know. So that information will help us a lot, Chair. So as we are able then to identify as members of parliament if there's any return of investment in as far as these modernization projects is concerned. And then also on modernization, last time I think we raised this thing, Commissioner, of SARS seems to be extremely advanced than other role players. And as you are aware, we're together at our port of entries. We have identified some gaps in terms of how you collaborate with other role players. Now, I'm not sure in as far as the modernization project is concerned, how much of what you call progress has been registered to bring on board other role players. I think that will help us to understand if, of course, other key role players in as far as, especially at our port of entries, are also taken on board, but they are also moving with the same pace with SARS in as far as this modernization project is concerned. And secondly, Chair, it came to the committee's attention that there is a need for ramping up our commitment in our what we call the coastal or ocean areas. When we visited the Durban Harbour, we were told by custom officials that they can't reach certain parts of our oceans. And that has been taken successfully so advantage of by foreign criminal networks. And of course, when SARS speaks of its effort to deal with intervention in illicit trading, one will be interested to know how much of investment is done, firstly, to capacitate SARS custom service in those areas. But secondly, how much of collaboration exists between, because one thing that was very evident when we visited the Durban Harbour, the Navy was not part of our engagements, but they are a critical stakeholder there. So how much of collaboration exists between SARS and the Navy in terms of dealing with these gaps? I'm raising this, Chair, because the South African maritime domain is very, very massive. I mean, it stands in now at 2,800 nautical miles. This is of strategic waters, you know. So definitely, as we are all aware, the underfunding that has affected the Navy has led to 4 of the frigates that have been used all along to be out of operation for approximately 10 years as we speak. And that has left a very, very serious gap in as far as monitoring our waters, or maybe our coastal areas, or even our ocean. And I wonder if SARS at any stage has they conducted a study just to identify how much are we losing of foreign revenue, which was expected to be generated from our oceans. I think that will be very, very interesting. But my parting shot on this question, Chair, is if SARS is in a position maybe to share the asset allocation in our harbors, where possible, the assets that are committed out of their collaboration with other role players in monitoring and patrolling those port of entries. That will help, I mean, for us also to confirm what are other role players committing in terms of resources to those areas. And lastly, Chair, something that is, the Commissioner, I'm happy, the Commissioner, you are committing to ethical conduct. Very, very important. Now, there is something that there is an enduring and a topical matter that has currently been resuscitated by the Constitutional Court ruling on the so-called Pala saga. Now, in our engagement with your predecessor, as MK Party, we made it very, very clear that we are not happy how SARS, from an ethical point of view, but also from compliance point of view with the laws of the country, more especially on issues of declaration of revenues and, of course, tax compliance status of individual taxpayers. We are not happy how SARS managed this matter, because in his response, your predecessor said, the response was in March 2023. He said, according to their findings, Ntabanyoni Estate and Ntabanyoni Feedlot is where Pala Farm entities are, were compliant with tax obligations, and they didn't establish any adverse findings. And we disagreed, because from a layman perspective, it was very apparent to us that there were serious tax law provisions that were undermined in that transaction. Now, what I want to know from you, Commissioner, because I think the Commissioner was referring here to the tax filing that was made in the previous year. I suspect it might be 2022. So I'm not sure in the subsequent tax filing made by the cited entity, is there any different evidence that has emerged that will obviously require SARS to revisit that particular response by your predecessor? And it will be very interesting because now you are a commissioner, and unfortunately this thing is happening at a time when you are a commissioner. And SARS is going to be on the spotlight again in terms of its ethical conduct and its biasness in terms of dealing with respective taxpayers. There's no way in which we can run away from providing appropriate response to this, especially from your office, a response that will make sure that the restoration of the confidence by our people on SARS as an institution of tax collection is not undermined. It will be interesting to hear what's your view. If you want, you can, but of course, with the pending impeachment processes, I'm definitely sure that at some stage you will be forced to give some information about your position to the nation. But it will be interesting to know what is your take about, from a SARS perspective or a SARS practitioner point of view, what is your perspective about how the Pala matter, the role of SARS in that development can be viewed or must be viewed? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Van Rooyen. Dr. Beck.
Thank you, Chairperson. First off, I would like to welcome the new Commissioner into his role and before this committee. Chairperson, I have 3 questions, all of them brief. The first is whether the Commissioner can give us a percentage, even if a rough percentage, of SARS's overall funding that goes to combating the illicit economy. And I see that you have a new illicit economy strategic plan. Are you able to share that with this committee, Commissioner? The second question is on a legacy problem. I heard the Commissioner today speak a bit about modernizing our VAT system, and now that's a half a decade to a decade undertaking. But regarding VAT on low value imports, the last time we heard, SARS was not able to start charging VAT on these because its IT systems were not in place. And I wonder if the Commissioner can tell us what the current state is. And then, Chairperson, I'm quickly going to share my screen for the last part of my questions. Commissioner, this is the reporting of suspected non-compliance, and this is a query that keeps getting raised by constituents, as varied as folks concerned about illegal animal breeding to very formal sectors and everything in between. I wanted to quickly demonstrate what we believe to be the issue and then hope that the Commissioner might be able to speak to it a bit. So if one goes to the SARS form to go report what one believes to be suspicious activity or tax crime, and you, for example, say you want to report a person, the first thing you have to do is indicate how many people are involved in this. And then the difficulty here is in the level of detail required to be able to actually click the submit button. Now, in technology terms, we call this a required or mandatory field. And it is the concern that because so many fields are marked as mandatory or required, that people can't actually submit these concerns or suspected crimes. For example, if you didn't know the ID number of the individual involved in what you believe to be non-compliance or even a crime, then you can't go ahead and submit it. Likewise, the passport number is a mandatory field and the date of birth. And so it goes on. The fear here is that if the burden of initial information is so high, I'm going to stop my share there, Commissioner, then one might never get to the point where you submit things. And if that's the case, then SARS is probably losing out on a lot of information. Or put that differently, any system has to find a trade-off between access and rigor. And if you lean too far towards rigor, then you have no access. And if you lean too far towards access, then you have no rigor. And so I fear that what we have now is a system that leans towards rigor and not access, and you might be losing information, and you're definitely creating frustration amongst those that are compliant to try and report those that they think are non-compliant. So I wonder if you thought a bit about how some of these fields can be relaxed, how one could think about having the minimum amount of information to be able to process it that looks a bit different to what you have now. I'll conclude my questions there, Chairperson, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Dr. Berg. We have been missing you for the past 3 presentations or so. Welcome back.
Thank you, Chairperson. The feeling is somewhat mutual.
Thanks. Tabiro,
Thanks, Chair, and let me as well welcome the presentation from SARS and welcome the Commissioner in his new responsibility. Chair, we have previously dealt with the issues of multiple jurisdictions, and I would want to really understand in terms of the percentage of tax that is collected from this taxpayers or where tax rights of multiple jurisdictions applies. And secondly, in terms of the illicit economy, I think we are seeing a new target in terms of illicit economy. And what would be the measurable targets if they've already developed any at the moment? And what would be the legal mandates of SARS that are currently being impacted by the ongoing underfunding of the entity, and what are the foregone tax implications if they are able to measure any of that? And Chair, the issue of the informal economy, I'm not sure how far much work has been done in terms of looking at that. And one would be interested in understanding the impact on the tax base in the country from that informal economy. And all the modernization or digitization program, what kind of impact is it having on long-term workforce headcount on or the medium-term need of the 16,700 additional staff, and how is SARS training them to adapt to the modernization project? Or what as well, Chair, in terms of the illicit activities, what would be the main milestones of the strategy in the current financial year in terms of the illicit activities or the targeted interventions within that? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Kabiro. Okay, those are the questions and the comments. Dr. Makubu and your team, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just go back to aspects of the presentation, if you don't mind, and we may need to just zone into some of those aspects to answer some of the questions that the members have raised. And thank you for the questions that have been raised. Let me take them as they came. There were questions that were raised by Honorable Beasley in and around the issue of debt and what the color of our debt book looks like. I must say that our debt book as we closed the financial year was sitting at around 650 billion rands. We have spent a bit of time to understand what is happening in that debt book. We are of the view that the debt that if we're to fairly state that debt, that the collectible debt in that regard would probably be around 300 billion rands. In that regard, we are accounting for a number of issues, including debt that is in dispute, debt that we know, for instance, the entities are no longer in operation, debt that we know that is raised at the back of people that are no longer alive, for instance, deceased estates. So if you look at what is really the fairly stated book in accounting terms, in terms of your debt book, we think there's about 300 billion rands of the 650 that we think we can be able to meaningfully collect. Of course, in that 300 billion or so, its aging varies. And there's about 70 billion that is over 5 years. And we need to look closely into this. Some of the entities have been liquidated in time. And therefore, we need to find a way of dealing with the 300 billion rand. So my answer generally is the debt book is stated as legally we ought to state it. But if you then filter out quite a number of what you would call in accounting terms imperable and potential write-offs of the debt, which again is a very legalistic process from a tax administration point of view, you are left with about 300 billion rands that you now need to work through. And we We have reported in the last year that we received about 113 billion rands of the debt book that we worked last year. However, in the year, there is also new debt that flows into that debt book. So my approach, Honorable Beasley, is to look at how we curb the inflow of debt. But we also know that as taxpayers are confronted with a very challenging economic environment, some of them would default, but we want to get to them as quick as possible. So from day one of your default, at least in this year, you will get a call from SARS. You will be assisted to get into an arrangement where you need to get into a deferral of payment arrangement, so that we are able to service the debt as it comes in. And where it's a matter of just being negligent on settling your debt, we'll also take the steps that we are afforded to by in law, including seizing assets and the like. However, I think it's not necessarily the new debt that comes in that will be a problem. It's debt that has been in our books for a long time. We think we've got adequate instruments in law to be able to do this, and we will continue to use those instruments in law. What we have not done in the past is to start to look at directors that are frequently appearing in companies that are incurring debt and actually take them on as delinquent directors in terms of the Companies Act. And I have asked our Chief Litigation Officer to start a program of identifying these directors of these companies that leave debt in the tax system through multiple companies, because my conviction is that these directors qualify to be listed as delinquent directors so that they cannot have the privilege of running companies and being company directors going forward. So that's another area that I'm looking into in this year to make sure that we drive the debt book. What we saw last year, Honorable Beasley, is that when we ultimately got to the debtor or the person owing us debt, they asked us to enter into arrangements with them. And in some instances, they have defaulted subsequently, partly because some of them are doing government business with government, and sometimes they get payments late and they are not able to honor their deferred arrangements. We have found out that there is 66 billion rands that is owed to us by people that have got active contracts with government. 44 billion rands of that as at the 31st of March was not disputed by those entities. So we are working closely with provincial treasuries as well as national treasury, first to surface when are the payments to these entities due, and before those payments are made, the tax administration is alerted so that we can then effect what is called third-party appointments to get to that money before. It has got other unintended consequences because employees in some instances of those in enterprises may suffer the consequences of not getting their salaries at the back of this behavior of their directors or the owners of those companies. But our approach has been that you cannot benefit from the state and not be in good standing in terms of taxes. So we are in this year accelerating, looking at that 44 billion and how we can be able to make sure that as those entities invoice the state, we are working very closely with the various treasuries, both national and provincial, to tap into those monies so that we collect what is due to the state. If there's a need to engage on arrangements, we can get into those arrangements. But my attitude is that if the debt has been long-standing, people have been getting frequent payment from the government, they ought to, at some point, suffer the consequence of their non-compliance in terms of the debt that they would have gotten through with us. So that's where we want to go towards, Honorable Beasley, and you will hear a lot of noise from some of these enterprises that are now going to be part of this process where we take money from them when they do business with the state. In terms of the workforce plan, or rather the influencing of young people to come into the organization, we have done as much as we can to bring in young people into the organization to make sure that the gene pool is balanced. As others are aging, new ones are coming in. But you can only do that within the limitations that you have in your funding. So we started a cadet program where we brought in graduates, trained them through the customs business, and absorbed them as customs officers through that cadet program. But you can only I think so far, I stand to be corrected, around 180 would have come through that particular channel. We've got 2,000 people in the customs environment. So the funding you have that allows you to bring in fresh new resources, train them to counter the risk of aging workforce, the financial resources you have may be prohibiting in that regard as we move forward. So I think in my conviction, as we look at how we fund the tax administration, we need to accept that every 7 years or so, you're going to have to recapitalize the tax administration, both from a modernization point of view and from a technology and human capacity point of view as we move forward. I'll come back to the question asked by Honorable Sekwati around what is the impact of modernization on the resources as we move forward. We have done some simulations on the impact of the economic downturn and how sensitive revenues are. We know that revenues respond quite quickly to the impact. So if inflation goes up because of prices down the transport value chain because of fuel, we know that quickly businesses start to feel that and they respond in terms of VAT that they pay to us. But also we know that in terms of profitability that comes through for domestic, normal domestic consumers, we also know that higher inflation would drive higher interest rates. And we know that that depletes disposable income, and therefore indirect taxes and consumption taxes in particular do respond pretty quickly. So we know that we will start to see the impact. In this cycle, it's even more pronounced because there is then the artificial intervention in the relief that has been given to South Africans, rightfully so, I may argue. And therefore, we have got 17 billion that immediately hits the estimates that we have projected going into the future, the 2.13 trillion I spoke about. So there is this response and the elasticity of revenues to economic shocks. In some instances, we see it immediately, and depending on the type of a shock, sometimes it lags. Our view is that currently, because there's been intervention by the state, we would likely to see that impact immediately in terms of the fuel relief that has been given. So we do see that impact coming in a varied range depending on the impact, or rather on the shock that we are seeing. We've modeled this. I can provide outcomes of that modeling at a later stage in writing if required, Chair. Honorable Van Rooyen asked some pertinent questions around modernization. You will see in this slide that we do say just modernization funding under bullet point number 4, that we think we need about 7.5 to 10 billion rands over the next 7 to 10 years. And we have said in our white paper that we've got 8 generational programs in terms of where this money would go into, partly VAT modernization, partly customs and excise modernization. I wanted to just acutely bring it to the members' attention by making the example of Libombo and the 180 million that we've spent, and extending that to the 20 commercial ports that we have, which, if we really want to make sure we are on top of knowing what comes into our country and leaves our country, we would need to replicate the same. Because if we don't, you close one loop and another loop is going to open elsewhere. And therefore, we extrapolated that number and said just on making sure that we've got coverage from inline scanning capacity point of view, which is just one part of modernizing customs, we said 3.6 billion is what we're going to need. So you already see that the 1.5 billion that we were afforded for modernization, which you will see in row number in line that talks about modernization in the table under total funding available, we break it down. You'll see that at 1.5 billion doesn't really go much in terms of covering the work that we need to be able to do. So we can break down that 7.5 to 10 billion rands by areas of the 8 generational program. We can provide that to the members in writing, Chair, so that when we say we want to accelerate modernization, we get money in that regard. Let me give an example. Just on illicit, let's take illicit tobacco. So if Honorable Sekwati asks what we want to do in this year, we said the program that we want to develop, yes, we've put that in, but we said, let's develop a program, have it signed off this year as the baseline document, and then we will implement according to that plan. So currently, I'm driving an integrated plan that, from a SARS point of view, we will drive. But let me give you specifics in terms of what I personally, under my tenure in this first year, we want to be able to drive in that regard, to give you a sense of the money dynamic. If you're going to introduce track and trace technology, for instance, so that you are able to leverage the force multiplier of South Africans at the point of sale, where they can be able to decide whether they want to participate in illicit trade or they want to fight illicit trade, you must give them the ability to detect what is genuine and what is fake, what is illicit and what is licit. And this all over the world is done through smart technologies that are put into packaging to be able to achieve this. In order to design this, you need to be able to have the right type of skills to apply it into the various factories. You need a value chain that is completely non-existent as we speak to be able to put this in place. But above this, you need 300 to 500 foot on the ground, boots on the ground, to be able to respond whenever then South African says we are picking this up in this area of Soweto or this area of Langa or this area of Umlazi or Kwamashu, so that you can be able to have responses that can actually go and enforce. Because without that, you are not going to be able to get the impact that you want to be able to have. We've said we need about 300 to 500 boots on the ground to be able to drive that. But we've also said that there is legislative changes that must take into effect in as far as how we are able to extend the customs control area from the factory to the point of sale. And that talks to the legalities that we need to impact and enforce as we move forward. So when we talk about customs and excise modernization, we put those sub-elements to drive that 7.5 billion to 10 billion rands. So I'm trying here, Honorable Van Rooyen, to answer your question to say, if you want to hold SARS accountable, firstly, what is it that we want to deliver? We want to deliver against the 8 generational program. We've got a publicly available paper on what those entails. We can resubmit it to this committee. And we can also give sense of where the 7.5 and 10 billion is going to go, so that we are able to cover our aspirations across those 8 generational programs and the impact that they need to be able to give us. In as far as we need to submit secondary information, certainly we will do that. We don't have any joint work that we do with the Navy currently offshore. When we talk about additional 2,380 FTEs that we need in that last bullet before the table, part of that goes into ensuring that we have got enforcement capability that we can be able to deploy in our marine unit, so that we can be able to collaborate with others. But to the point that we have made previously, that our efforts have been fragmented until now, and that's why we are where we are. The picture that Honorable Van Rooyen paints, where there is clearly fragmentation. And our view is, when we talk about the National Illicit Economy Disruption Program, including what happens on the shore of our country, it is partly to be covered by a very integrated approach across all agencies of the state, whether it be the SANDF in its varied capacities, including the Navy, the BMA, SARS itself, border policing, etc. That is what we have put forward, and we are continuing to work with the colleagues to make sure that we start to effect that work as we move forward. Ourselves, the BMA and Home Affairs, for instance, have done some work around one. I said we are now bought scanners for Libombo. We know that the BMA, I don't want to speak on their behalf, they've started a PPP process, and they are looking at the 6 ports of entry that they want to redesign, to re-look into, so that they are much more efficient. We are latching into that so that we can bring in the detection of illicit flow of goods across our ports of entry. So there is this collaboration that is starting to emerge, and we want to make sure that it matures as we go forward. But I can say that we don't have a structured collaborative program with, for instance, the Navy on the shore. But we think that through the work that we are doing in the National Illicit Economic Disruption Program, we should be able to have an impact in that regard. As we say, in this table, you can see what we have asked of National Treasury and what they've come back to us. And we continue this iterative process because, again, there's finite resources, and there's a part of us that appreciates the challenges that National Treasury is facing in terms of meeting the expenditure side of the fiscal framework and the demands placed in that regard, as well as funding some of the profit center, such as SARS, that needs to be done. So we continue this conversation, and in my tenure, I'd like to get closer to this conversation and find ways in which we can find each other. The bottom line at the end of this table shows you over the period where the underfunding and the tune of the underfunding has been. And it also tells you what in the 26, 27, 27, 28, 28, 29, what the underfunding is at the bottom, 1.5 billion, 4.1 billion, and 4.1 billion again in 28, 29. So that is the set of numbers that we work with as we move forward. I think when it comes to the issues that relate to the matters that have been raised on such matters as Phala, I think generally one wants to reserve opinion on this in as far as the taxpayer matters are concerned. I've taken time to review the documents that informed our decisions and our utterances. And one of the things I found is that the consent that was given by taxpayers was very specific to time periods. And therefore, I'm not at liberty at this point to discuss any taxpayer matter that goes beyond those periods, because then I would be violating the confidentiality provisions that our law puts forward in defense of taxpayers. So we will watch the space, and when called upon to respond to formal structures, we will do so. This said, I am not deviating again from my submission on the record that I will, as long as I'm commissioner at SARS, drive the independence of SARS, the autonomy of SARS, ensure that SARS acts in a manner that is without fear, favor, or prejudice. And I can only speak of my tenure at this point, but I can also assure you that this posture is not a Johnston Makubu posture. It's the posture that has been in this organization under Commissioner Kisveta, and I am taking that forward as an accelerated basic response to the tax system. And if we need to come through and make representations, we will do so at duly constituted structures. And that is not to say we are running away from accounting in as far as that is concerned. I can assure you, I've looked at the documents because I want to appraise myself to say, have we come to the right decisions? What has happened subsequently? And as I say, unfortunately, I cannot speak to the subsequent periods that I'm not at liberty by virtue of the limited consent that had been given at the time to deal with these matters. I respect the question that has been asked, and I think it's pertinent for us to look into. Honorable Beck, I think on the other parties, Chair, to Honorable Van Rooyen's question, I think when we say that we've got a border management program that we want to run, our border reform program that we want to run, we are recognizing that no one entity can be able to win on this. So we are working with BMA, and we are exchanging technology, we are exchanging ideas. We have agreed that SARS would lead the technology part of that work, whereas the BMA would look at the physical infrastructure. So as an example, when we talk about Libombo and what we want to do in Libombo as a proof of concept, we are saying we will bring the scanners, we will make sure that the scanners are integrated into both the physical and the soft infrastructure. so that by the time we are done at Libombo, we are able to say this is the proof of concept that we'll take forward. And of course, in that regard, we have to work with DHA, we need to work with BMA, we need to work with SARS, and increasingly work with the border police as well as the National Defence Force. And that is the conceptualization of that work. And from a SARS perspective, we will not renege from that because it is a interconnected system that we need to work on to as we move forward. There's questions that were raised by Honorable Beck around small parcels and VAT. I can assure you, Honorable Beck, that as of 2024, we started collecting VAT on small parcels, and we've seen revenues that have come through from our customs import VAT perspective that has come from the levying of those. We must say that like all other jurisdictions, the automation of that low-value goods part of flows of goods can be accelerated. We have put in our customs and excise modernization a work package that looks at modernizing e-commerce. So it's acutely in our 7.5 to 10 billion rands that we spoke about earlier. And it's a package of work that looks at modernizing that. However, we have seen that since we've started to charge that VAT, we have started to collect on it, even though it's quite manual at this point in time. But I'm confident that since we made that decision, we've seen in excess of 1 billion rands that we've been able to collect in that regard. And we think what is also happening is that those that were declaring these as low-value goods are now seeing the attention that we are placing, and they are correctly declaring it under the SAT 500, so that it's no longer passed through as low-value goods, but it is passed through as normal commercial transactions that are declarable under the SAT 500. So we've seen a bit of that behavior in the environment. So I can assure you that we are collecting that VAT, but I do concede, hence we have put e-commerce modernization within our customs and excise as a package of work that we need to focus on. I must assure you that even the EU is struggling in this regard, and we are exchanging notes in as far as how we can be able to move that forward. I take the issue around the demonstration that has been put through. I think it's a balance, Honorable Beck, that we need to strike between getting adequate information to be able to downstream have the ease of investigation. But I take your point in terms of, and I will specifically look at this with the team to say, how do we remove the burden of reporting to ourselves whilst balancing having adequate information so that you can readily investigate and not inhibiting those that want to rightfully do the right thing in terms of blowing the whistle on specific matters. I will commit, Chair, to report back at the next opportunity on what we have done to update this area. And I do take note of it as rightfully pointed out to us by Honorable Beck. There was also a question here on the percentage of funding that is allocated to the enforcement work and the illicit economy countering efforts. I'll go back to the SARS boardroom and maybe just ask Moya whether you are able to give us a view on this. If you can't, Chair, we will reserve this question and respond to it in writing. Moya?
Good morning. Thank you, Commissioner and honorable members. So the illicit economy in our plan is included under the outcome on increased voluntary compliance, and that's around 425 million rands. The details are included on the page 27 of the APP, Chair. Thank you.
So we've got that allocation as responded to. We know that it could increase as we move forward, as we make clear our plan. I did indicate that this year we wanted to have a formalized plan that we can submit with milestones that we can then move through. But we do want this year to start looking at technologies that can allow us to track and trace, designing those together with the likes of the National Consumer Commission. That's why we've signed an MOU with them. We do think that we may also want to leverage the South African Reserve Bank notes company in as far as looking at technologies they adopt in placing marks into our notes in the country that are covert and overt to allow us to be able to track properly the licit goods and differentiate them from the illicit. But as I said, important that we're able to also catch the issues that relate to people that we will need to enforce, because you can do all the technology. If you don't have the people to enforce, you would have technology that cannot be backed up by people in that regard. Honorable Sekwati, I think we've responded to the PQ around multiple jurisdictions with regards to the work we are doing with the DHA to be able to ring fence people that are working in country on permits that just bring them to the country temporarily for specific type of work. There's a number of issues that play here around whether we've got interjurisdictional arrangements around DTAs and the like, avoidance of double taxation, and whether the people are truly in the country for more than 183 days or so, which make them in a year, which makes them tax resident. I must accept that we have not focused on this area. We've started work with the DHA to be able to exchange information, to be able to look specifically at this group of people. And I think that PQ that came through in the last 2 weeks points to some of the areas that we may need to focus on as we move forward around taxation of those people that work in multiple jurisdictions within every given period or any given period as we move forward. So we will want to perhaps at midterm come back with answers in this regard as we move forward. How much revenue is forgone by virtue of underfunding? We would argue that that answer is in the tax gap. We said that the tax gap is anything between 350 billion rands and 450 billion rands, just if you do it from a macroeconomic top-down perspective. And that is what you would not tap into if you are not funding yourself funding the tax administration effectively. We know, however, as we have seen with the HMRC, for instance, that closing the tax gap is not an instantaneous one-year issue. It's a multiple-year endeavor that requires sharp focus with the right resources that you may need in your organization. So we would think that the underfunding stops SARS from closing the tax gap, and it's a multiple-year loss because to close the tax gap, as we have seen in studies we have done before, is a multiple-year issue that we can be able to effect in the environment. The other question was, what is the long-term impact of modernization on SARS workforce? Our view is that we've committed ourselves in line with our strategic objective number 4 to make sure that we evolve our workforce. We are of the view that there will be very little of the workforce that we would want to lose, but we think that we can prepare our workforce to move, for instance, from some of the mundane, repetitive work that AI will take over, so that we can move those resources to work that includes, amongst others, forensic investigations, specialized audit, because even if you have AI, those pieces of work will always be required. Even if you have AI, you're still going to have boots on the ground in the form of the enforcement inspectorate that I spoke about for excisable products. So in as much as, yes, there is this move towards modernizing, our commitment is that our staff will not be left behind. We know the areas we are modernizing, but we also know that there are areas that we are modernizing that will have to be complemented by human intelligence at an evolved level. And we will continue to prepare our people and train them to move towards that. What are we doing currently to make sure that our people start to see the environment of AI? We've given all our employees access, for instance, to Copilot, so that they can start to use AI and big data and LLMs to make their own work much easier. As we speak now at SARS, an agent on our contact center can be able to ask AI a question, and AI can look at the SARS large data and be able to give an answer, whether it's a policy answer or whether it's a standard operating procedure answer. And that makes them much more efficient and much more responsive to the taxpayers' queries that come through. And we think as they continue to do that, they will evolve themselves to higher level work. But we are committed to move with our people and make sure that no one in our people is left behind in terms of the work that they need to do. Chair, I don't know whether I have left any question unanswered. The issue around VAT modernization, let me talk about just our conceptual thinking. We want ultimately to have the same auto assessment that we see on PIT effected on our VAT 201s. That's my dream. That's what I would like to be able to achieve. We know it's possible if you are able to do it with PIT. We may want to say there are specific type transactions that we can do that on, but we want ultimately to be able to leverage e-reporting, where entities are able to report transactions into the tax administration as they happen by embedding the tax administration in the natural systems of retailers, for instance, at the point of sale, and be able to pass that through. We've seen this actively in places like Poland, Russia, Portugal, and increasingly even in the African continent, the likes of our colleagues in Uganda and in Kenya are moving in this regard. But I think in answering this question, the model or the concept is about allowing the same benefit that taxpayers have seen on the PIT, where they just get auto-assessed. We want to get to that point as well, where we use data, third-party data, that is e-reported to SARS, and that informs the auto-population and therefore the auto-assessment of some of the VAT 201s. And we think that will revolutionize the service we give to VAT vendors, whilst lessening the burden of compliance from their end. So that's the thinking that we have. We will be publishing in the next 2 months or so a sequel to the paper that we published 3 years ago on VAT modernization and what it means. And we will be taking comment from role players in the environment, especially big multinationals that might have experience in other jurisdictions around the same work. So we want to prioritize, to Honorable Likwati's point earlier. What do you want to prioritize in the modernization? One, we want to prioritize VAT modernization. We want to prioritize customs modernization. And thirdly, we want to prioritize the fight against illicit trade through technology, coupled with human resources. So the issue of track and trace, if we can in this year get to a point where we've designed a tracking solution for accessible products, and we have tested it with industry, and we are comfortable that it meets the standards globally, I think we would have moved a mile towards achieving our modernization in this regard. Ultimately, you want to put it in the hand of a consumer who, through their phone, they can scan a code and be able to pick up whether this goods was manufactured in the country or was imported, who imported it, when did they import it. And this is not new. Others have proven that it can be done. Chair, let me stop there. If there's questions that I've not answered, we will be glad to be reminded of those and or respond in writing on them. Thank you.
Chairperson.
Okay. Dr. Berg, you want to make a follow-up question?
One brief follow-up question, Chairperson.
Okay, over to you.
I'm going to share my screen again for this question. Commissioner, thank you for your responses, including that you and your team will look at the non-compliance reporting. I look forward to engaging with you in our next session on this issue. Commissioner, what I'm now sharing is the latest report we've got, which were the draft responses to the 2025 Rates and Monetary Amounts Bill on November 2025. The question I have is still on the VAT auto collection for small value items. This is the response we got at the time, Commissioner, that SARS are required to amend the IT systems to cater for this amendment, and the amendment can only be practically applicable once this is done. And I didn't seem to get clarity on this, Commissioner. I understand that by law you're able to collect VAT on these items, and you might be doing so manually. My question is whether the automatic charging and collection issues, as reported in November of last year to this committee, has now been resolved. That's my question for now, Chairperson.
Thanks, Dr. Berg. Is there any other follow-up question? Okay. Back to you, Commissioner, and your team.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask Franz Tomasek to just give a view on this? Franz?
Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning to the honourable members. So the devil is in the detail, as it often is in tax and customs legislation. If you look at the text that goes just before the response, you'll see that this relates to a fairly small subset of goods that are not subject to customs duties at all. So the law as it currently reads is that if you have low value goods that are not subject to customs duty, that is not payable. What the Commissioner was dealing with was the much larger set of goods and more significant set of goods where duties are payable. So where we're dealing with things like clothing, footwear, perfumes, all those goods that are subject to customs duties are subject to VAT in terms of the law. And SARS in 2024 withdrew a concession that there would be no VAT charged on those low value goods. So with effect from the 1st of September 2024, all the sensitive goods where the local competition good concerns are the most pronounced have been subject to VAT from SARS' perspective, and we have been collecting the VAT on that. So what you're seeing there is essentially a legislative tidy up to make sure that that covers all goods. And because we're now dealing with the less sensitive goods, we come back to a theme that the Commissioner raised earlier, which is we need to pick our battles and prioritize. So we are focused on the key aspect, which is collecting the VAT on the sensitive goods. And we are working as best we can to catch up with something the customs system has not had to deal with up to now, which is charging VAT on goods that are not subject to customs and excise. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Franz. Chair, back to you.
Chairperson.
Dr. Berg.
Another follow-up, Chairperson. Thank you for that response, and nice to see a team of SARS officials on hand to help deal with this. I just want to be clear then, this has not been resolved. The legislative tidying up that is now being mentioned, we were last told cannot happen because the technology isn't yet in place, as I understand it. Can you give us a timeline of when this might be resolved?
Franz, do you want to just clarify again on this not being yet resolved? Thank you.
Thanks. I've just tried to check on what the status is on that. Unfortunately, I don't have a response on it yet, but we can clarify that as soon as we have that information. Thanks.
Honorable, back through you, Chair. If we can be afforded just a tie back with our colleagues in customs, so that we can come back to where we are in status of that. I commit to provide in writing an update in terms of the last question to say what is the timeline within which this will be covered. Thank you, Honorable Beck, for the question. We will respond accordingly in writing.
Thanks, Commissioner. Before I call Alan and Tebuko for announcements, any parting shot, Commissioner, before we close?
Chair, thank you very much for the engagement. It has been quite insightful for us, and also confirms that this committee support is in place. We like to come and account. We'll continue to respond whenever called upon to account on the various aspects of our work. We'll continue to be an independent tax administration, and our autonomy will defend. The committee can be assured that we are working together as a unified leadership team, even in this transition, and that I am resting with the team that is competent and willing to take the organization forward. And we will continue, Chair, to make SARS a national treasure through the work that we will do without fear, favor, or prejudice as we move forward. And thank you, Chair, for listening to our plan and our aspirations for the year current and beyond. We appreciate this. We call upon South Africans to ready themselves for the filing season. We know that it's a very busy period. We get a lot of issues that come up. We call upon South Africans to pass by our service centers, update their details, make sure that they are ready for the filing season. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. You know, in Parliament, when there is a new member speaking for the first time, that member is given privilege to speak without disruption and enough time to do so. Because this was your maiden presentation, we had to give you as much time as possible and also make concluding remarks. Thanks very much, Commissioner Makubo, Deputy Commissioners, and the entire executive, and also up to the lowest employee of SARS. When we were there last week, we did not only meet commissioners, we also met ladies who were making tea for us. We met those who were cleaning the floor there at the bridge. They make SARS to tick. Without them, SARS will look like a dirty place. Without them, everything will be helter-skelter. So we don't only thank you, we thank up to the cleaner and everybody who's there at SARS. Pass our regards to them, and also for the hospitality that we enjoyed last week, and the state of the art, that center. Members were quite very happy. Dr. Beck, you missed a lot. They've got a state of the art data center, which is quite very, very impressive. They can follow anyone, anywhere in the country, anytime, live, as long as you are a taxpayer. They showed somebody in Guyana seated there, waiting to be served. They can call a SARS employee, why are you not attending to the taxpayer there? Because he has been sitting for more than 30 minutes and nobody is attending to him. So we were quite very, very, very impressed with what we saw last week. Keep it up. And as honorable members have said, we will champion for more resources to be allocated to SARS. not because we like you more than all other entities. No. What should be understood is that SARS is the backbone of the state, not just government. SARS is a state organ. There's no state anywhere in the world that can operate without a tax revenue collection organ. Even Jesus Christ, I know I'm entering Dr. Makubo's terrain as a pastor in his spare time. When he was born, his parents were going to pay tax. So it's not something that started today. And then he even told his disciples that give Caesar what belongs to Caesar. So it means if Jesus Christ instructed everybody to pay tax, who are we not to pay tax? So let's make sure that we encourage people to voluntarily pay tax and not look at SARS as a beast. We'll give you the maximum cooperation that we have given to your predecessors and make sure that we work very closely with you. The other issue that we'll have to discuss is the illicit economy. Now that there is a team that has been appointed under the supervision of the presidency, we hope we'll get a report in that regard. And also the issue of the digital economy, which is a problem. There are many companies that are trading in the digital space. I know the OECD is moving at a slow pace in this regard because big countries are resisting in this regard. But something has to be done because lots of trade is done now through the digital platform. So thanks very much. We'll meet again. And thanks to the honorable members, to SCOF support team, and everybody who is in attendance. The meeting is adjourned. Thanks very much.